everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here for this conversation. For this conversation that we've titled Margin to Center as an exploration of inclusiveness and outsiderness from an IFS perspective. I want to just name up front that, as we came up with the title for this workshop, I took this from Bell Hooks, who was an amazing Black feminist writer. And she wrote a book in 1984 called Feminist Theory from Margin to Center, in which she was talking about the experience of Black women within the feminist movement and the ways that they had been marginalized, and talked in this book about ways to bring Black women more to the center of the conversations. And so, I really felt the parallel into what's happening here with the IFS community of wanting to bring marginalized voices more to the center. So wanted to give her credit for that. So just as we're starting, I think we're going to start with introductions, and then we'll move into a little meditation. So I'll open the floor up for that.
Yeah, so I'll get started. Hello, everybody. I can't see you, but I can feel your energy in this space. My name is Crystal Jones. My pronouns are she and she, her. I live in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I own a group practice that specializes in creating safe spaces for BIPOC women to do their healing work. I also provide IFS consultation and supervision. And now that I got all of that out of the way, the personal thing I want you to know about me, the things from my heart, is that I am coming up on a 20-year marriage, right? And before I left the house this morning, my husband was like, come on, you got it, right? And then he gave me a hug and told me how proud he was of me. And so that's something that I want to share with you all. I also am the mother of 3 kids, 2 of which are teenagers who still let me hug on them and give them kisses. And yesterday they told me, do good, Mom, just do good, And so those are just some personal things I want to share with you all from my heart outside of my professional space. And so welcome. And I'm so happy that you all are here.
Hey, everybody. I am Natalie Gutierrez, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm cisgender. I want to honor my young me right now, who is just here. She always has to be spoken for, and she always just wants folks to know how nervous she feels to be seen. And I want to honor her because she does a lot for me, and she's done a lot. So I want to love up on her, and I want to also introduce y'all to her too. I live in New York, which is the ancestral and unceded lands of the Lenape. And I am Latinx, I am Puerto Rican, and I just want to say to that, even though I'm a person of color, I navigate and show up in the world in light skin. What else can I say? I'm a mother of 2 little people, ages 6 and 4, so I have my hands full, y'all. And in private practice in New York, working with complex trauma in BIPOC folks. And I'm writing a book. It is going to be released in December of 2022. And it is just, it is breaking me open. It is breaking me open. I mean, there's just so much trailheads coming from that, and so much love, so much soul at the same time. And I'm an equestrian. I love riding horses, and that's my way of just really taking care of myself and healing my soul. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal, Natalie. Good morning, everyone. I'm Requina Barnes. I'm from Cambridge, Massachusetts. My pronouns are she and her. I'm an MSW by training. I have a private practice. I'm an adjunct professor and very involved in the IFS community. As far as my personal, I have 3 children myself, ranging from 25 years old to 3 years old. That always gets a conversation starter. As far as race, I am a person of color, but I actually identify as a Black woman, African American. And let's see, what do I love to do? I'm going to throw that in there. I love spending time with my family. I love to travel. I love sun. I love the beach. I love positive energy and positive spaces. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation we are about to have this morning with all of you in the room. And I'll pass it on to Kim.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Paulus. I'm here in Oakland, California, unceded land of the Ohlone tribe. I have been in the IFS community for over 15 years. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist here in Oakland, and I see people who are at the intersection of BIPOC and LGBTQ. Almost all of my clients are queer folks of color here in the Bay Area. I am queer. I am a mixed race person, daughter of immigrants, one from Vietnam and one from Germany. My mixed race identity is really important and kind of affects how I move through the world and really affects my feeling of outsiderness also. I'll talk more about that later. I'm a step parent to an amazing 19-year-old genderqueer person who I think I was telling Crystal is the only one in the world who's allowed to call me Kimmy. Don't get it twisted.
Right.
And partner to an amazing nurse and union organizer here in Oakland also. Let's see, anything else I left out at this point? I don't think so. I mean, folks who know me know that I love to laugh. I will let my part say I'm an amazing cook. And one of the things that's been so hard about being online and making these connections is I just want to sit everybody down and feed them and show them how much I love them, and haven't been able to do that because we're all so far apart. Let's see, what else? I think that's it for now. But I want to just at this point, as we've introduced ourselves, just kind of reiterate what our intention is here, to talk again about the concept of marginalization, the concept of outsiderness, how we have experienced that in our lives and also within the IFS community, and to also talk about inclusiveness and bring our collective wisdom here to talk not just about how we have been left out, but how we know what we need to be, to really feel and believe that we are centered, that we can be centered in this community, not just us here in this room, but all the people who look like us and who love like us. And just as we're talking about this collective wisdom that we're bringing together, the four of us have collaborated on a meditation to share with you and to lead the whole group in. It's a beautiful process creating this together. And so just to give you a heads up that as we move through this meditation, you'll be hearing different voices. So just give your system a heads up as we do that. And I think that's all we need to say from here. So I'll kind of sit back and just start to settle in.
All right. And so everyone, I want to extend the invitation to make yourself comfortable if you aren't already, closing your eyes or softening your gaze or leaving them open. And breathe in the way that feels right as you settle and relax into your body a little bit more and more, if that feels okay. And as you slowly relax into your body, I invite you to envision the four of us in a circle. Envision us holding hands, if it feels okay to do that. Feel into the spirit of our group, the sacred and loving energy that we're creating together today, supporting each other. Feel into that togetherness, that connectedness. And as you do that, notice what parts are present for you. For me, I have young parts that like to hide and be silent. Because to speak is to be seen, judged, and dismissed by the parts of others. If it feels right, offer yourself an affirmation that is rooted in your liberation and dignity. Your presence in the world is important. Your voice is important. Your words are important. Your tone, your fire, your passion, your intensity are all valuable. You are not an imposter. You are part of the conversation and the community. And if you're BIPOC, know that you have the right to take up space. Remember that you're a part of the global majority. Let's recognize the truth of our collective power.
And as we land in this space collectively to create community, notice the parts of you that have given you space just to show up, be part of the conversation, and ultimately a part of the solution. Today, I am celebrating the parts of me that have historically, and even a little now, feel terrified of the backlash from speaking my truth and sharing my experience. Those parts have been so careful to say and do the right thing. Today, I am so grateful those parts have given me space and other parts have come forward in a more self-led way to say, I am here, I have something to say, and I have something to contribute. We all have a role. We all have something to say or something we can do to contribute to an IFS community that represents all voices and all experiences. Take a moment to consider what you can bring as an offering to this community.
As we are sitting here with all of our parts, I want to acknowledge all of the ancestors and all who came before us. Thinking about what gifts are you grateful to have received as we begin this conversation of inclusion. As a panelist, I want to bring some of my gifts I'm grateful for. The gift of being a melanated woman, the gift of my 3 beautiful children, the gift of choosing social work as a profession. I embrace these gifts as I enter this space, and I invite everyone who is joining us today to think about what gifts are you bringing into this space.
As you join us here today and witness us naming both the burdens and the gifts that we bring with us, and with this invitation to consider what comes with you to this workshop today, I want to further invite you to bring yourself and your system to this circle that we have created. Imagine this circle of 4 expanding to include all of us here in the room today, and all of us who will watch this recorded session later. In whatever way feels possible for you, bring yourself to this expansive circle, and then invite your parts to join ours inside the circle. Along with all the parts that we have named, I invite your parts that come up around inclusion or exclusion, or your relationship to and place in the IFS community. As I say that, I notice my part that assumes that I will never belong anywhere. I invite her to be here in this circle with us, and I invite your parts to join mine and ours in the circle too. And as we hold this expansive circle together, with ourselves holding space for all of our parts, I want to invite you to breathe in from this collective self energy and then exhale that collective compassion, love, acceptance, curiosity, and connectedness out all over these parts. Alone, we can hold compassion for ourselves and our own systems, but when we connect together and hold these parts collectively, the self energy is magnified and grows exponentially. Really let your parts that are sad or scared or frustrated or confused feel the breath of that collective self energy and let them take in as much or as little as they want. Now, as your system takes in that self energy, remind your parts that you are there for them and that this collective self is there for them as well. Take a couple more breaths in and out from this collective self. And then when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes and come back to the room. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us in that. Just as we're grounding from that meditation and moving into our questions for discussion, just to kind of reiterate, our intention here is really just to talk about our experiences in marginalization, kind of our background with it, and then move into a place of this collective wisdom around, how do we move forward as a group here? We've prepared some questions, and Requina is going to lead us through that. I'll hand off to her now.
Okay. Thank you. That was an awesome meditation, ladies. That was awesome. Okay. So as we transition into these questions, before we begin the questions, I want people who are watching us to maybe think, if you're someone who identifies as someone who belongs to a marginalized group, thinking about what some of your experiences have been in the IFS community. That is something that we will be sharing. And so I'm going to begin with our first question that we prepared. And the question is, how do you define otherness, outsiderness, from your personal perspective? And what are the personal, cultural, and legacy burdens that you carry around? So who would like to answer that question first? We'll do popcorn style.
I can answer. I just want to make sure that you hear me, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, my experience with otherness is one where the parts of me, the expression of the parts of me and myself isn't enough. It's deemed not enough. It isn't enough to be accepted. It isn't enough to be considered. It isn't enough to be celebrated, honored, and that the expression of my parts, like the colorfulness of my culture, and maybe that I speak 10 levels higher than other people because I'm just loud, that isn't welcomed. That it's more of the Eurocentric parts of others that are welcome, and that my parts and the expression of my parts is seen as deviant. That's for me, what comes up. And when I think about otherness, and I just think about like in terms of examples, representation in the media, barely represented. I mean, just even in trainings and stuff like that too, right? Like how the IFS community can be a microcosm of what happens in the larger system, and just the lack of representation, the microaggressions that you experienced when Fatima had named in her workshop earlier around people touching your hair, that being a thing. Just a reminder that I'm different and I'm happy to be different, but me being met with the parts of other people that maybe want to shrink me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you, Natalie. So when we first started to work on this workshop, I know we're kind of going back and forth about the word otherness, because I know it landed in my system as, what do you mean I'm other? I am it, right? Like there are parts of me that, that say I'm here, I'm a part of this. I am not on the outside of this, right? And I think that is the part of me that wants to be strong in the face of adversity, or wants to carry that strength when when I feel that people aren't seeing me as equal. It kind of wants me to kind of raise up a little bit. And I just kind of want to just backtrack to say that for me, otherness really speaks to a system that centers the experience of a dominant group, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of holds that up as the norm or the standard. And so for me, even before we even get to IFS community, how that manifests for, people of color, period. And for me, I'm thinking of just being, a young girl and not being able to find Black baby dolls anywhere, right? Like there's a message when you're in the store and you see all white baby dolls, right? And your parents have to go to special, have to find stores, have to go all over town to find a Black doll, right? Or growing up in schools where you don't see teachers who look like you, or the standard being straight and long hair, right? And feeling like something's wrong with your hair because it's not naturally straight and long, right? It's bushy, it's kinky, but just carrying that in your body. And as an adult woman, right, coming into IFS spaces, and that part of me that's like, you belong here, it gets into a space where it might be the only Black person, or it might be, it might not see other Black faces teaching. And it's that part kind of comes down a little bit, and it's like, I notice my inside shrink. And it's like, well, maybe you don't belong here. And it's a really lonely feeling. And the part comes up and says, well, maybe you can't show up all the way, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you can't, like Natalie said, speak too loud, or maybe you can't share your vulnerabilities, your racial trauma. This is not the space for that, and this is not the space that's going to support that. And so what do you do instead of taking up space, right? You fall back and just kind of like just take everything in. And that's what I see a lot of us doing. That's what I see a lot of my clients doing. And that's what I've done in spaces. And underneath, there's a deep sadness that we have to operate in that way because of the ways in which we've internalized white supremacy culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just really appreciate what you said, Crystal, about otherness being associated with being outside of the dominant culture and what is expected in the way that they kind of prescribe what a life is supposed to look like. Mm. I think it's that piece that, gives me this really complicated relationship to otherness. I think, Bell Hooks defines to be in the margin is to be part of the whole, but outside of the main body. Mm. And as a biracial queer person, I feel like that is what my whole life has been about. I think about I have this complicated relationship to otherness, and that, like, as a biracial person, I'm part of the whole of Vietnamese culture. But I will say that my whiteness, both my whiteness and my fatness, keeps me on the margin of even being included within Asian community. As a biracial person existing in a white culture, I am half white, but my color, my Asianness, keeps me out from the main body of white culture as well. And as a queer person, I think part of my identity as a queer person is someone who exists on the outside and does not prescribe to what the heteronormative way of having a life is. You know, and there, as I said, I have a complicated relationship to it. In some ways, that has made me feel smaller. There are ways in which I do shrink back and feel unseen. And I think that one of the gifts that queerness has given me is this ability to, like, really embrace. I don't need to live my life in the way that mainstream heteronormative culture has defined it. One of my favorite writers is this queer Vietnamese person named Ocean Vuong. And he has this beautiful quote that I have actually included on my website that says that, you know, queerness demanded an alternative innovation from me. I had to make alternative routes. It made me curious. It made me ask, is this enough for me? And it just leaves me this opening of, if I don't have to live in this community in the way that is prescribed by dominant culture, then I get to be innovative and decide, what do I want my life to look like? How do I want to exist in this community? And also, you know, where are places where I can influence the community to be more welcoming for people who, you know, have lived outside the margin, and make it not just, you know, folks, I have to live on the margin, but how can folks who are different be integrated into the community and have their perspectives be welcomed also? So, you know, this feeling of outsiderness, it can be painful, and also it's given me so many opportunities to create new things.
Yeah, I appreciate this question. You know, I was thinking, I have a part as a woman of color that has been very protective of my system, and I call it a mask, right? And I call the mask, like, I have to mask up, also referred to as protect my system. And so when I hear otherness, when we were preparing it, I was like, I'm not other. Like, I'm a Black woman. I'm proud to be a Black woman. Like, no, I'm not other. And then the more I started to think about it, this mask that protects me when I'm in spaces to be felt like I'm other or an outsider or not good enough or not even acknowledged, right? White spaces, primarily academia, right? Trainings, certain employers. And so the mask has also protected me in my system to deliver a message like, we're okay, our system's good, right? It's like people on the outside, that's the issue, right? So it's like this complicated, yes, I feel othered, but then my system, like, shuts myself down. Like, no, the problem's out there, not in here. So it's very conflictual. And I think that's why the wording itself, otherness, was something I really had a hard time really thinking about how it was applicable to me. And I understand how my system operates and why it operates the way it does, very protective. Because when you do let people in, or when you do become vulnerable, or you ask for something, what's going to be the consequence? And that sound, as I'm saying, it also sounds like an unhealthy way to think. Like, why me asking a question has to come with a consequence, right? If I ask an employer, like, I'm ready to move up, you know, I have enough experience, I have the education, the part of me that asks, right, goes to the vulnerability, is like backlash, like, you're going to be turned down, you're not going to get the opportunity, you know, you're not ready, because that actually has been my experience, right? And so this otherness is repeated over and over and over, but my system has a way to protect itself. So that's the way I would answer the question. All right, let's move on to question number 2. What are some of your experiences of being marginalized by the dominant culture in and outside of the IFS community?
Look, I know we all have something to say. We're just smiling at each other like, who's going to go first? And I just want to say maybe too, we want to invite BIPOC folk, who have also had these experiences to share your experience in the chat as well, as we're talking about this. So I guess I'll go first since I'm talking. What I've witnessed and what I've felt, right? Well, first I'll say this. I feel like when we've centered I'll give a story. I'll take that back. I'll give a story. When I was in college, my mom had taken care of my car insurance forever, right? And so finally, when she said, "Hey, you're grown, you can pay your own bills," and she took it away, I was like, "Wait a minute, what are you doing? Why are you taking it away?" I felt some sort of way about it, and I was probably upset. That probably sounds real privileged, but yeah, I didn't realize that somebody paying for your car insurance was a privilege. And so I say that to say that when an experience has been centered for so long, right? Like when BIPOC people begin to speak and center their experience and say, when they begin to say, I want to center my experience. I don't want to center this experience anymore. It feels uncomfortable, right? Because we're not used to showing up, right? White people aren't used to hearing us say, no, this is not okay. And so that's what's happening now. And so there's a lot of discomfort around that. And so in spaces when that has happened, right, one of the ways that people of color are marginalized when they're speaking up is comparative suffering. I've heard a lot of comparative suffering, and that looks like, well, I've suffered too, or you're not the only one. And I always say, right, if I say, Natalie, my grandmother passed, and I can say that because my grandmother has passed, but Natalie, my grandmother passed, I'm not going to expect Natalie to say, well, you're not the only person who has had somebody who passed, and so when BIPOC folks are sharing their pain in the space, it's really, imperative to listen and be present, right? Like, versus this thing of, I've suffered too, let's see who suffered the most. And so there's that. And there's this thing of being dismissed and feeling left, right? And so when BIPOC folk in spaces speak their pain, or when someone, expresses a microaggression, just the apprehensiveness to address it because for fear of shame, right? And so, like, the message that is spoken to me is that it's okay that I'm hurt, right? But we want to protect white people's shame, right? And we want to protect white people who, may have parts come up around me sharing my racial trauma. And so in that case, I'm sharing the racial trauma, but we're directing all of the attention to, we can't have this person feel shame. And I'm like, why not? Like, we have an amazing model to help us hold our parts around shame, around guilt, and even for me to hold my parts around my own racial trauma. But oftentimes we're so scared of shame that we avoid it at all costs. And for us to have these conversations, we're going to have to go in, right? We're going to have to go towards the shame. We're going to have to go towards the guilt. And like I've said in a lot of trainings that I PA'd, that I don't expect you to drag me into your guilt and shame, but I can hold space with you while you do your own work around it, right? But a lot of times I see BIPOC folk dragged into people's shame work, and that's damaging. And so when I hear people say, do your work, right? Do your work really means stop pulling us in. We got our own stuff. Stop pulling us into your stuff too, allow us to witness versus being a part of it. So we won't have, it's just a lot of emotional labor involved in trying to hold ours and caretaking yours as well. So just being willing to hold your own parts. I know I said a lot there. So I'm going to share space now. I have a lot more, but I'm going to share a space.
Crystal, I'm letting what you're saying go into my heart because I love it. And yeah, I'm just sitting with it. And also to that, I even forgot what the question was. What was the question?
You want me to reread it, Natalie?
No, I got it. And also, subgroup to what Crystal's saying, and also that, my parts have felt this expectation in trainings that are, white majority, to expect me and other BIPOC and other, folks that are in marginalized group in the space to share, experiences of racism and to speak up for just their experiences with microaggressions in a Zen-like kind of stoic space. And when you don't do that, folks are automatically like, oh, she's in a part, and they're in parts, and that feels so hurtful. That feels so hurtful to me. And I know that, I'm not alone in this experience. I'm definitely I'm not unique in this experience, but yeah, it is a weaponization of self. It is when, anything that is shared around racial trauma, and other, traumas as well, anything that is shared that makes white people uncomfortable in the space, when it's shared with a bit more charge, when it's shared with, when our ancestral rage is in the room, rightfully so, it becomes, or we are seen as intimidating rather than your parts are intimidated. And that's your work, right? But we, like, our parts, our self-energy, our courage, right? Courage is a C word in the self. That part becomes like oppressed and pathologized. And rather than hearing and holding space, like, we're pathologized. And what I would want to see more of is like this holding, like we're sitting and we're uncomfortable, because it's not like it's comfortable for us to talk about it either. That we're sitting and we're all, in this discomfort, and that you're also able to sit with the ancestral rage and the rage around inequity, and that we get to sit with these feelings rather than putting the stuff on us, like Crystal was sharing too, around like holding your shame, that our ancestral rage is also welcome, that our self is not weaponized, that we can sit with all the discomfort and we are not pathologized, because what we feel is sacred. It's important. It's part of our story, and it affects and impacts how we are received in the world today, which includes the IFS community. That's it for me.
Kim, would you like to go? You're on mute, Kim.
It's the tagline for 2020, 2021. No, I'm sitting here just appreciating what you all are saying, and feel like I said a lot last time. I'm gonna sit this one out.
Great. I'll add to the conversation because I know, again, wording for me, my parts are like the words is what my parts activate from. And the word dominant culture, hearing dominant culture in itself for my system says white supremacy. BIPOC people taking care of, like Krista was referring to, taking care of fragility, right? And I've seen this in and outside of the community. And it shows up in different ways, whether it's I, not speak to make more space or run over to somebody whose part is being activated by fragility and some shame and guilt. And so I think for me, the dominant culture piece really resonates with me because it is something that I feel, just like Natalie was saying, is something for us to speak about in trainings in the community of IFS, and to really allow it to be a responsibility for everyone in the room. It's not just BIPOC people. It's not just the leadership. The leadership plays an influential piece, but it's really the whole training community in that moment has a responsibility, in my opinion, to invite the invitation. Let's talk about marginalization. Let's talk about, I don't know if I would use the word otherness, because that might be triggering for some people, because I know my part took time to digest it. But let's talk about being a person of color in this experience, right? And not making the assumptions because two people that might look the same, for instance, if Crystal and I were in a training and the rest of the training was white, then we're going to take care of each other, right? Because that's projecting a responsibility onto us as Black people. We might be two different people that might not even get along, or we might not be compatible. So not really making those assumptions neither. So I think the dominant culture, what I like to say is, let's speak to it, right? We don't have to be fearful of it. It's a reality. It's going to activate parts for different reasons, but let's talk about it. Yes, Crystal.
Requina, before you go to the next question, I just also want to speak to I want to speak to downplaying privilege, right? Because I think that's another important piece. When I hear things like I don't see color, or we are all one, or why does color matter, right? And I have parts that just raise up in me when I hear that, because my thought is, well, that's easy for you to say because you don't have to think about color, right? When people see me, right, they see my Black skin, right? Like I don't get to hide. I don't get the privilege or the luxury, right? To be anything else. So I want you to see me. I want you to see me as a Black woman, right? And so to say that you don't see color also means that you don't see me, and all that comes with that. And so that's just another piece that I just wanted to add. And I think it's important to acknowledge color, acknowledge who's in the room, and that it matters.
Yeah. And I just want to add in here, I think just really related to that like, one of the things I've experienced as we are bringing more people of color into the trainings, more people of color onto the staff of the trainings, that is naturally meaning that we are having, there are more issues of race that are coming up, just as part of, that are coming into these level 1 trainings in ways that they have not before. And I think I just want people to know that it's not that they are coming up now because this is a new thing and because these are new experiences that we're having. These things are coming up now because, we are showing up in these rooms as not the only person of color in the room. And I've had the amazing experience of feeling connected with and supported by other amazing people of color on the training staff, which gives me the strength and openness and support to feel like I can talk about this stuff that I have not been able to talk about before. And it is met sometimes with reactions of, this is not what we're here for. This is not what this training is about, is to learn this, is to talk about this stuff. And that statement is such a marginalization in and of itself that, I am not here to talk about or to hear about what your experiences are as a person of color in this community. That's not what I'm here for. And I think I just want people to know that, like, I come into a white space. I'm not here to learn about what your experience is as a white person, but that is the default. And so I have to listen to it anyways. And it's just expected that, we're going to hear about the experience of the dominant culture. And so to hear, like, I'm not here for this. This is not what I came here for. There's a part of me that's just like, sorry, this is what we're doing. And I feel so blessed to have the backup and to have the support of, the three of you and the people that I'm able to work with on staff to see that change happening.
Yes. That was good. I really love these questions. And so now we're gonna take a pause. To everyone in the audience, Olivia, if you can help us out a little bit, we're gonna take some questions, maybe some comments from the chat. If people want to, add to the discussion, we're gonna make some space for everybody who's in the audience. And then we have a second part of a couple more questions. So if you have a question, a chat, the time is now.
Okay, Requina. We'll give people just like a minute or so. That have
Olivia, you're cutting up a little bit.
Can you hear me now? No.
It's a little choppy.
I think that's been the issue
Throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Sadly.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So I don't know how much people are getting.
Yeah, and I think that it's going to come through a lot clearer on the recording, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's too bad.
I don't know if we can get, well, maybe what we'll do, since this is not working, maybe we'll just continue the question. Oh, Olivia's here.
Hi. Can you hear me now without my headphones?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
good.
All right. Okay. So, there have been problems with the audio. I think some people have been able to hear, but most people haven't. So they are going to get the recording. As far as we know, the audio is going to be fine on the recording, but it might mean that we don't get questions now. So
Okay.
I'll double check. Let me just have a look on Q&A, just see if anybody has put anything in.
Everyone is saying they feel our self-energy, but
Yeah, that's disappointing, but the word will still get out there.
yeah.
Yeah, you've got one from Kathleen. I feel the presenter's self-energy despite the choppiness. Yeah, and they've also asked if there's a way to contact the presenters directly, especially after listening to the recording. So a lot of people were stayed a long time to see if this audio would come in better for them.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
So
But
maybe
you're on mute, Requina.
Sorry, maybe we'll just go back to our questions since we don't want to take too much time with the tech. Okay, thanks, Olivia.
And we can give contact information at the end.
Yeah.
That's good.
So sorry about that, everybody. It's out of our control, but we're going to roll with it. We're just going to roll with it.
That's what we do.
We're going to act like we're all sitting in a circle. So here we go. We're going to go with the program. All right. So question number 3. What are some times when you felt included in the IFS community? Let me repeat that. What are some times when you felt included in the IFS community? What are some examples?
I think so. I really want to give a lot of props to our ATP collective, right? Because I think a lot of the work that we've done in that space has been felt in other spaces, like we've gone out to our collective sessions and we've brought it, and because of that, some changes are being made. Just props to our mentors, Tamala Floyd, Pamela Cross, and Tony Irvine for just for having our backs and just for really like sitting with us in some difficult conversations and teaching us, right? So I want to give props to our ATP team. So a recent training that I PA'd in was pretty amazing because it was an experience that I had never experienced before. So I get this email inviting the white PAs to form a white affinity space that was going to be led by the AT. So I'm looking at this like, well, what is this? Like, I've never heard of this before. And then they had just different readings and resources that those PAs could check into to be prepared to have conversations around diversity and inclusion and even privilege. And so for me, that felt welcoming as I don't know what. And I didn't have to be a part of that infinity group as well. There was just this opening that the atmosphere was being set, right? That this was the expectation, right, for entering this space, that we're going to have hard conversations, be prepared, right? Come prepared with your questions, and you can ask them in a way, where you don't have to feel guilt or shame with other people of color in the room, right? So that felt really welcoming. Also, this concept of shared, shared leadership, right? Like PAs really trusting the wisdom, not PAs, I'm sorry, lead trainers and assistant trainers really trusting the wisdom and leadership of their staff, like to share the responsibility. And when I say share the responsibility, I mean, there's so many gifts in the room when we have a staff together. What are some things that you would like to teach on? Would you like to do a demo here? Would you like to lead a meditation here? Because it's really about developing leadership, right? And it's difficult to develop leadership, if we're not doing. A lot of us need to do and get the opportunity, right, to be in these spaces and to serve in these ways. So we can feel comfortable actually, doing it. So those are times recently where I've really felt included and just really felt proud of the IFS community and what the community is doing. Yeah. I guess one more thing I'll just add to is when trainers are taking responsibility for calling out microaggressions and not leaving that burden for BIPOC folk to have to defend themselves, right? That just, what did Marta say? That's like medicine for my aching bones. I love that. But yeah, like having somebody call that out and it not be me, having a lead trainer or an assistant trainer, saying, hey, let me give you some feedback on that. Right. So I don't have to do it, or I don't have to hold all of these parts that are saying you're not important. Look at this person who just said this, and go through that whole thing in my head again, because somebody has my back in that space. So that feels good. Yeah. Okay.
For me, I'm just thinking to how preemptively, like I'm PAing this training right now, this level 1 training, where the trainers are bringing it up. They are educating on power and privilege. They're bringing it into the room. And I just really appreciate that integration, because I think, folks, well-intentioned white folks, and just others, like there is I want to say common practice for our manager parts to say, like, I don't do that, or I'm not racist, and thinking on to like Fatima's slides around microaggression, that there's parts of us that want to protect us from our implicit bias. And the parts of us that are conditioned to be racist, homophobic, transphobic, all of that, and ableist. And so trainers bringing that into the space, bringing that awareness into the space and teaching on that, just for me has felt so powerful, because like Crystal said, one, you don't have to be the one to name it. And it also has people thinking about it in a more full way, because I forgot who said that. I think Kim, I think it was you who said that folks will say like, oh, but this isn't IFS, right? I'm here to like learn IFS and I'm here to talk about this other stuff. I've heard that this isn't cultural competency class, right? And it's like, we need to integrate all of this. We need to integrate all of the isms into how we teach. We need to integrate power and privilege in the IFS model, because we need to, we just need to. And I appreciate when trainers do that. And I don't see it very often. I think it's a new thing that's beginning to happen. And I think it needs to be a standard that we do to really get us thinking more holistically about this.
And also, Natalie, it needs to happen, right? Because we're not just speaking to one group of people. You know, we're not speaking to one group of people. We're speaking to people with, you know, just diverse cultures and backgrounds, and it needs to be a reflection of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, I feel like I'm just kind of echoing what other folks are saying, but, you know, pieces that have made me feel really included, you know, is, I think, a lot of the sharing of power and sharing of leadership very intentionally, where lead trainers and assistant trainers are really inviting in the voices and perspectives of, you know, the more marginalized people in the room to talk about, you know, our cultural experiences of self, how our, you know, cultural backgrounds might influence how we understand self that might be different than how, you know, the dominant culture understands self. And that while it is different, it is still just as valid. And that there is, you know, and when trainers really bring in that there is room for there to be different understandings of what self is based on people's different cultural backgrounds. And they can't, you know, and lead trainers who really recognize that they don't have all the answers for that and can lean on their diverse staff to bring that knowledge as well, and to really value that as really additive to the conversation and not just taking time away from the schedule that we got to keep. So that has been, you know, some of the experiences I've had lately that have been just felt really welcoming.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge Duran Young, because I think, you know, with the BTR collaboration with IFS, the opportunity to not only invite BIPOC into the room, but also invite the conversations into the room. So I just want to acknowledge Duran for allowing her to have the vision to collaborate with IFS. And this year is the 3rd annual BTR IFS training level 1 that's going to be taking place. And it's an amazing experience. That was the first year was the first PA experience I had. And I think I got pretty lucky, because it was a good standard to set as far as my parts being seen, heard, welcomed, and having an opportunity to be on the staff. I also want to give acknowledgement to Chris Burris. He is an awesome trainer. He is also a great person who, his motto is shared leadership. So he, as you work under him, or as I've worked under him, he allows us to take on leadership responsibility, particularly as BIPOC staff, to gain the skills. Because I think I heard Crystal say, you know, in order for you to move forward or take a step forward, become more successful, someone has to give you opportunity, right? If you're never being given opportunity, if you get a label, but you're not being given opportunity to develop the skill, you're not moving forward. And so Chris is really good at letting his staff take on share leadership. Sometimes he'll ask you, what do you want to cover? Sometimes he'll, suggest certain things. And I think being in Chris's trainings have really allowed me as a PA, coming up on an ATP mentee role in one of his trainings, feeling included, feeling heard, but also feeling like Chris takes the opportunity to bring the conversation into the room as a lead trainer. And so I think those experiences, I get to feel how it feels to be included and feel included authentically, right? It's not a checkbox, because I can feel the difference when somebody's just trying to say, okay, check, I address culture competency, anti-racism, check. I know what that feels like versus someone genuinely caring. And so I think that's the difference too, being included in IFS communities where I'm welcome and where I wasn't welcome. There were also experiences where I wasn't welcome or heard or seen. But the distinction of feeling included also makes a difference. I can also hear the information different because I'm not, as I spoke about my mask part also, mutes things and gets distracted. And so feeling included in the IFS community is possible. I've experienced it. And also it takes responsibility, shared leadership. So that's what I would say to that question. All right, so moving along. What is needed in the IFS community to bring more sense of inclusion? What is needed in the IFS community to bring more sense of inclusion?
I think I want to just build on what you were just talking about with Black Therapist Rock, Requina, and just the way that the trainings are being done within, in collaboration with that organization. I've had the deep honor to be able to PA to assist in the second round of BTR, and then going to do it again for the third. And, my experience in that, I've said this before in other spaces, and I want to say it here, that I really believe that BTR is the epicenter. What's happening in BTR is the epicenter of decolonizing IFS. That is the center of where that is happening. And I am so excited to get to learn from Chris and from Tamala and from all of the amazing Black folks in that organization of how to lead an IFS training that centers the experiences and centers the cultural backgrounds of people of color, to learn from there and then to take it out and let it percolate out into the rest of the IFS world, into the trainings that I will lead. And so I think it just acts as such a model for how we can do that. It's really the epicenter of where that is happening. And I really want to see that influence coming out more. Yeah, and I have lots of other ideas of, how we can improve the inclusivity. I think one of the big things is I want to see there be more affinity-based trainings outside of just BTR. I think BTR does an amazing job of serving the Black community, and I want that to continue. And I want to see trainings that are for other BIPOC. I want to see trainings that are centering queer experiences. I want to see trainings that are centering Latinx experiences, Asian experiences, etc. I know that I learn and am able to take in information so much better when I feel safe and when I feel included. And if IFS really wants this model to get out to more marginalized communities, it can't just be that we're carving out a few spaces in a white-centered training. I think we need to create trainings that are centering these marginalized communities in order to get this model out to our people.
Yeah. Kim, I'm so glad you gave props to BTR, because I was just kind of rocking when Requina was talking. I was just rocking, just thinking how important it is for us to say their names, right? To say the names of the mentors who have really, been responsible for bringing us into this space where we can share in this way, right? Like, they have really helped to develop us to be able to share in this way. So I'm holding a lot of gratitude and appreciation for them. And I also want to note, a lot of the folks training here today are out of BTR, right? Like, so that just, they're out of BTR, but they're also serving in other areas of leadership in IFS community beyond, right, that level one. And that just, I get chills just thinking about that, because that's the intention, right? It's not just to take a level one and be done, but it's also, you know, to continue the learning, you know, to again bring others back into, right? So it's not just me, right? It's okay, who else needs to get this training? You know, who else, if I find out a bit about BTR training, who else can I pull into this, you know, so they can be connected as well and get into this space. And so thank you for just speaking to that. To the question, right? What's needed to establish more inclusion? This has to be a top-down thing. A top-down thing. And what I mean by that there has to be a buy-in from leadership, not just in words, right? Not just in box checking. Who said that? One of you all said checking the box, right? But in systems, in training, in policies, and in staff, right? Yeah. So to me, it has to be a top-down buy-in, and there has to be the learning and the teaching. There has to be some kind of mainstream focus on how we're reaching the folks we're trying to welcome, right? Like, because it can't be some folks over here are excelling, some trainers over here are excelling in this area, and then some trainers are on an island kind of doing their own thing, right? It's not cohesive to our model. So I think if we have that top-down buy-in, you know, everybody can be invested in how we teach this model, so it can be more welcoming. What else do I have? So this is, I don't know if this is a me thing, but compensation. That's big, right? Like, nobody ever talks about that thing, but compensation is huge. And so, oh, there's so much I can say about compensation. But I guess what I want to say most is, you know, that people who are developing in leadership, or just, you know, doing trainings in IFS, put a lot of money, and time into this, right? A lot of people, you know, are earning, like, they do a lot and they're earning less than they would earn, right, if they were just working their regular jobs. And so to me, that sets up a privilege dynamic, right? Because when we talk about folks who, you know, might come from a single earning home, like might not have a partner who earns and who can hold them down, right? That sets up a privilege factor of who gets to do these trainings, who doesn't, who gets to PA, and who doesn't. Can everybody afford to PA, right? Compensation is a big factor in that. And so to establish more inclusion, we really need to look at that and understand too that compensation isn't just money, right? And so how can we make these programs more accessible, and how can we take care of our people who are trying to develop leadership in this model? How can we take care of them better, if not through financial? I like financial, right? But what are some, I don't like financial, right? But what are some other ways? Natalie said me too. But what are some other ways we can take care of our people and ensure that they're not laboring in vain? Yeah. So that's that on that, y'all. Pay me. Oh.
Where's the lie?
Yeah, and oh, do y'all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hopefully Chris will be back.
Okay. Okay. Subgroup. I'm having a part that's like, I don't get to heart anything that someone is saying. I don't get to write subgroup in the chat. I'm like, how do I like, so I'm doing this, and I wish I had a bell so I could do that. So yeah, just know that that's my, yes. Okay, so and to, I guess, to subgroup on Crystal's compensation too, is that a lot of the BIPOC PAs in the space do a lot of labor, right? Yay! Wait, unmute.
I was like, oops, I said the wrong thing. I done got booted out. They took me out. I was talking too much. They tone policing me. I was like, uh-oh. Sorry.
Woo. I was just subgrouping what you were saying around compensation, and just, knowing that really in I want to say most, if not all, of the spaces that have sprinkles of BIPOC PAs that are doing a lot of labor, right? And being compensated the same amount, and equal is not equity. So we're doing a lot of labor, and more than a lot of the white PAs in our space, right? And yeah, and not being compensated. So that, and then also I wanted to say, I guess, I could have a scroll, but for sake of time and taking space, I think just really also recognizing that I think people tend to tell themselves that when BIPOC are in the space, that we are the ones that are bringing up race, and really wanting to invite people to see this as more of race is always present in the room. Race is present in the room, whether you like it or not. It is present in the room. It's present when you're in a space that is full of white folks, unless of course it's an affinity space, but it is present when you're, when it's a room full of white folks, and it's important to be curious about why that is. It's present when there's only sprinkles of BIPOC in a predominantly white space. It's important to be curious about accessibility to the training. I know now there's a lottery system that happens, but the lottery system ain't cutting it. And, still seeing that there are very few people that look like me, that are melanated, that are queer, that, that are not from dominant identities, that we are all so underrepresented. And we need to be curious about that, because it is always in the room. And then also thinking about just like in spaces that I've been into where there are BIPOC who do look like me and don't want to talk about race. And then there's me who is talking about race, and the discomfort around that, and that race is in the room. So race is always in the room. And we're not the ones bringing it up, but we are the ones naming the energy. We are the ones that are naming that energy in the space, but it is always in the room. So I wanted to share that. And then I guess the other thing to share is really inviting the IFS as an organization to also look into how they have perpetuated cultural legacy burdens as an organization. So how has the organization itself perpetuated patriarchy, has perpetuated racism, has perpetuated ableism, homophobia, transphobia, individualism, like how materialism, right? How has IFS as an organization perpetuated that? And how do we, what do we do about that, right? I think we need to really be having hard conversations about the harm that an organization can also do, because it's also perpetuating cultural legacy burdens. And what do we do about that? And what are the conversations we can have around that? That's about it for me.
I had to make sure I put my mute button on, because I'm sitting here like, yes. I'm doing all the background noise. I said, let me put my mute button on over here.
I was saying earlier that I feel sad that I can't like heart or like write in the chat like subgroup because I've been owing all this time.
Yeah,
I'm
but that's
just
that
trying to
call and
nod my head real
response,
big.
right?
Yep.
That's that call and response. That's how we communicate, and that's our subgroup, right? Like that's how we're saying, I feel you on that, like,
Mhm.
yeah, I feel that in my bones. Yeah. Requina, you're on mute.
I was just checking the chat to see what was going on over there. Kim, would you like to go? Would you like me to go?
Oh, I already said something in the beginning. I'm
You
looking
did.
forward to hearing
Okay.
what you have to say.
Okay. All right. So inclusion. I was subgroup into, and that's why I stay on mute because I have a habit of going, yep, that's right. Yep. And when I think of inclusion, particularly with IFS, just to reiterate a lot of the things that were already said, but leadership top down, like Krista was saying, is very critical. Natalie, you talked about some of the burdens that we look at. And Kim, you also alluded to, the community kind of being responsible for some of the inclusion. And so just to add to all of that knowledge and all that's already been expressed, inclusion, I agree, is a top down, from the leadership, the top leadership all the way down. Because what is the message? Is the message the same, or is the message over here and then there's another message over here, right? And so the way that I see inclusion, particularly in IFS, is to reconstruct, and I think IFS has done better, and there's also room to grow, right? So reconstruct some of what's already been put in place, that the community's starting to look different, and what does that mean? Since the community is starting to look different, what are the needs? How are the needs changing? And so I think that, Kim, I think you mentioned, the conversation being a staple across trainings, right? It's not just a conversation if BIPOC's in the room, it's a conversation because that's part of the training curriculum, right? But in order for that to be included, it goes back to the top. So are we saying trainers, not just being trained in anti-racism, but also, I'm going to say a self-inventory, right? Because just because I'm trained in something doesn't mean I believe in it, doesn't mean I want to implement it. So I don't even know how that would look, but if you do a self-inventory, you get to see what's going on within your system. Because if you're resistant to it, then there's something going on in your system that might need some attention before you deliver the message to the wider community. Right? Because it's once you get in IFS trainings, there's a lot of energy that travels through the room, and people can feel that resistance when it comes to certain topics, such as race, such as gender orientation, right? It gets felt in the room. So I would say inclusion is an open invitation, but also with intention, right? To open the invitation with intention. Right. So we're not just talking to talk. We're talking because we want to connect. We're talking because we want to know, but not know to utilize you for the source of the information. So I don't have to do the work. It looks different. So in the interest of time, ladies, we have about 8 minutes. That was the last of our questions. I'm just thinking, how do we want to utilize these 8 minutes as we're going to close up? Since we weren't able to get to everybody with questions and answers, we really missed that proportion. So maybe as we're closing, what are some kind of last words as we're closing our beautiful circle that we came in the room today with? How do we want to wrap this circle up and, kind of transition to the rest of our day?
For me, I think I just want to say that, when we call in, right, when BIPOC calling in white folks, right? Calling in white trainers, calling in just all of these systemic issues, that it's coming from love. That I think folks' parts tend to feel really attacked, really like shamed, attacked, right? And that I'm just wanting to extend that invitation for you to also hear that it's coming from love, that are speaking to you, that are calling you in is coming from love. If I'm not calling you in, believe me, I don't love you. I don't, because I'm not wasting my time on you, because my time is too sacred. So if someone is calling you in, it's because they're saying, you impacted me in this way. I believe you can do better, and I love you. And can we do this? Can you do this? And know that I'm still here. That's what I want to share.
That makes me want to cry. I love that. I love that. I love that when we are calling you in, I feel like we are acknowledging that I will speak for myself. I'm acknowledging that I believe that you have the energy and the capacity to do better. It's not that I'm looking at you and seeing your faults. I'm looking at you and seeing your capacity and your heart. And I'm just I'm asking you to access that. Yeah, I think what settles for me as we're closing here is just so appreciating the three of you and being in this circle with you together and creating this space together. I'm just so happy that we are doing this and that we're bringing that energy out into the rest of the community. And I'm sad that folks didn't get to interact with us dynamically in the moment. And I'm just so glad this is going to get out there to more people.
Yeah. Excuse me. I'm just thinking, you spend so much time preparing and being nervous for it that now that it's about to end, you're just like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. So I don't even know how I want to put this together, but what's coming to mind is the U-turn, right? The ability, right, for not just white folks, but for all of us, right, to be with our parts, to hold our parts, to value our parts, to listen to our parts, so we can get the space needed to show up, right? And then what I love that I haven't heard us talk about as much, that Tony Herbine always talks about, is the return, right? So that means me kind of going internal and then returning to community, right? Returning to community, returning to whoever was harmed, or returning to where there was a misunderstanding. And I just really feel when we can do the U-turn and then return to one another, that's when healing can take place. And I just even notice in my own parts that's when I soften, and that's when I can extend compassion, right? And that's when the work begins. And so if you're listening to this, let's return to one another, right? Let's return to one another so we can create the healing that we can all benefit from.
Yeah. I love that, Crystal. The U-turn, the return. And it makes me think of the reciprocity of the process, right? And that's where the C's can come in. The curiosity, the compassion, the creativity, right? And we can connect and have a dialogue and a conversation on the same level, right? There's no better than, there's no, all these hierarchy dynamics. We're talking, we're connecting. So I love it. And I think, and for my closing, I think continuing to have the conversation, But like Chris says, know what conversation you're having, right? It could be 5 different conversations going on, but being clear about what the conversation is so that we can move together in the direction that we want. And know what parts are present, and know what's yours, and know what's not yours. So as again, we're wrapping up. This was a great experience. Thanks to all of you, Kim, Natalie, and Crystal. I'm thinking as we close this circle, and as we are, coming to an end with this experience, maybe just one word that we can close the circle out with as we're connecting in this experience, through this experience, from this experience.
Power.
Nice.
Community.
Appreciation.
Love.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
Mm-hmm.